To win the war against COVID-19, vaccinations will only go so far. That's according to OECD Secretary General speaking to Arirang News. Upon the OECD's 60th anniversary, the Secretary General emphasized the spirit of cooperation and strong communication, highlighting the example of South Korea in fighting the pandemic. Here's part 2 of Oh Soo-young's exclusive interview.
Vaccinations alone won't end the global coronavirus pandemic. To build back better from the devastating fallout from COVID-19 across economies and the damage to people's livelihoods, national response and recovery plans must be clear and coordinated across borders. That's according to Angel Gurria, Secretary General of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Speaking to Arirang News, Gurria stressed that multilateralism is the only way to tackle the countless common challenges presented by the worst health, economic and social crisis since the Second World War.
Multilaterally is the only way to go, through the WHO, through international organizations that are looking at the different ways to do it. For example, we at the OECD, we have made a very important, a very practical contribution. We now have 167 policy briefs, decisions on taxes that can be used for the purpose of fighting COVID. What are the decisions on education? Then what do you do with the health systems to make them more resilient? What do you do with the SMEs, which are so threatened? What do you do with the tourism, the sector that suffered the most? Every day, the new questions that come up. And the question really is, how do you deal with that, if not multilaterally, and by using not only the best practices to learn from everybody?
Upon the OECD's 60th anniversary this year, Gurria drew upon the organization's founding mission of rebuilding post-war Europe with better policies for better lives.
This is why we define ourselves not as a think tank, but as a do tank. And I have been defining the OECD as a do tank for 15 years now, because it's about policies. We have to implement them. We have to practice them. And this is what will make the difference. This is what will help millions of people.
But not all governments and citizens have been on board. The Secretary General pointed to leaders giving mixed messages about the severity of COVID-19 and growing skepticism around vaccines. Gurria stressed the need for clear and effective public communication to win the seeming battle of morale, especially at this critical time when second and third waves of transmission are taking place.
We have to kill the pandemic, we have to beat the pandemic, we have to win this war against the pandemic with the vaccines, but also by a discipline. And again, Korea is an extraordinarily clear example of the fact that with the discipline, with the leadership, and with the people having faith and having trust in the leadership, in their leaders, because the leaders are clear and the leaders give very clear signals, and they're very clear also about the consequences, and people are willing to support the policy. And then what happens is it works. It works. You know, we don't need to go too far.
To make a strong COVID-19 recovery and tackle climate change, biodiversity loss, growing inequalities, the concentration of wealth, digitalization, and the future of work, Gurria stressed that countries must band together and consolidate trust among their populations. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.